Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I rise to make some contributions on behalf of the Australian Greens today, and I also thank the Minister for taking the slightly unusual step of reading his second reading contribution in so that we can have a bit of clarity about what's been going on behind the scenes. According to the government, the Veterans Affairs Legislation, Digital Readiness and Other Measures Bill 2016 has the objective of improving services for veterans and speeding up the claims processing pipeline. The DVA is preparing for much-needed upgrades to its IT systems and processes, and this bill aims to set the legal pathway for these changes to take place. Currently, legislation governing veterans' affairs, and particularly the Veterans Entitlements Act, is antiquated and it needs updating to reflect more modern times. I think bringing it into the 20th century is certainly not a bad idea. And likewise, officers at the DVA are using technology of a bygone era. And maybe it's an exaggeration to say that they're still stuck with punch cards and faxes, but it's probably only just an exaggeration. And our understanding being, obviously, that it's a constraint, not just a technical constraint, but they're constrained by legislation in that human interaction is required to make and check off really simple calculations that could easily be performed by modern technology. So through its IT upgrades, DVA wants to reduce the time that it takes to reimburse veterans their expenses and to streamline the claims processes. And I want to put on the record right now at the outset that the Australian Greens are very supportive of this objective. Bringing the DVA, the need to bring DVA into up to date is obvious. Many veterans have to wait more than 100 days to get their money back for their claims. And I'm sure that Australians on lower incomes in particular can imagine the frustration and the difficulties posed by having to wait for inordinate amounts of time to get really simple out-of-pocket expenses reimbursed, and veterans obviously face this systematically. So that's putting our support on the record, but like others on the crossbench, we have real concerns about some aspects of the legislation, some of which was addressed by the Minister and his shadow on the way through. Firstly, to address the Byzantine system that is the current veterans' entitlement system. That it's a mess is something that I think all sides of politics probably agree on. Veterans not only face unreasonably long wait periods to be reimbursed the cost of their claims, this is stuff like taxi receipts that might take 6 months to be reimbursed. And on top of this, rates of entitlement are inconsistent and then they're arbitrary. Application and assessment processes are labyrinthine and circuitous. And for many veterans, the bureaucracy at DVA is a barrier to getting what they're entitled to. And all parties should be working together with the veterans community to create a better system for those who serve this country. So in response to this mess, the Greens have consistently said that we support the undertaking of a root and branch review of the veterans' entitlements system. And this review would determine whether current entitlements are sufficient, which is obviously important as a separate question to the streamlining of the process. And the review would determine whether current eligibility criteria are fair, including access to health cards, disability pensions, housing and superannuation arrangements. One example that would probably be familiar to many, because myself and others have been making this case for many, many years, is an automatic entitlement to the atomic veterans to a gold healthcare card. Automatic as of right entitlement, given that if the harms that were caused in the British bombings of Australian service personnel in the 1950s and 60s, if those radiation exposures had occurred at the hands of an enemy power, these veterans would automatically be entitled to this highest degree of health care without having to prove that that particular radiation exposure was the cause of their illness and their illnesses of their children. But because this exposure happened at the hands of an ally, they have been excluded and they are dying one by one. And so we are very supportive. I understand that that is one particular cohort of individuals who we have utterly failed, and they were harmed in the service, so they thought, of their country. And so we are very strongly supportive of an overhaul in this regard. And complaints about DVA are on the rise, which is an indicator that the system is failing. So the review of service delivery should consider assigning each veteran a liaison officer to act as a single point of contact to navigate the system. That's just one example. Now, I understand the government's motivation for bringing these amendments forward is to allow software to perform some of the mundane or repetitious or tasks that would be better performed by automated systems, to free up the human beings to actually deal face-to-face with the people that they're there to serve. We are obviously supportive of this objective. In relation to this legislation, though, with amendments which we believe are necessary, and we've circulated a couple, I understand some of my crossbench colleagues will be doing the same, we believe that a couple of key aspects of the bill need to be changed before it proceeds into law. One around computerised decision-making and the thresholds whereby we would delegate certain tasks to software as opposed to human intervention, and the other one obviously around disclosure of information. And the recent Centrelink debacle has thrown into sharp relief the need to be hyper-vigilant with these powers. And I don't think it would have escaped anybody's attention in this chamber or anybody listening outside this building, the incredible debacle of the Centrelink robo-debt fiasco, which we are aware has cost at least one person his life. People have killed themselves because of the pressure that has been put on them by being told by a massive government bureaucracy that they owe them significant amounts of money, and that they're going to be pursued and hounded. And as it's turned out, in an extraordinarily high failure rate, many of these debts do not exist. Under closer scrutiny, they simply evaporate. And yet the government, instead of acknowledging that its introduction of this automated debt recovery system has been an absolute debacle, have doubled down and have started effectively doxing people and disclosing people's private information to journalists in an attempt to have their side of the story heard. And I would put to you that this is a worst-case example. Now we're proposing to potentially extend the reach of this kind of malpractice to veterans, to people whose health in many cases is fragile, whose mental health in some cases is fragile. The last thing they are going to need is the kind of treatment whereby the minister sitting in the ministerial wing of Parliament, and again, this is not implying bad faith on behalf of the minister or his staff, but we are in here to assess, I suppose, what could happen under this government or a future government if good faith weren't to be implied. I would assert very strongly that in the case of the Centrelink example, there is no good faith in play here. This is a government that's trying to do political damage control, and they're doing that at the expense of some pretty vulnerable people. And the last thing we want to see is for veterans to be subjected to this kind of behaviour. So we just want to make sure that the government and that no minister is being empowered with that kind of incredible asymmetry of access to a megaphone that anybody else has put through that kind of horror. So Schedule 1 of the bill deals with computerised decision-making, and as I've said already, we have no problem at all with the idea that some of the tasks that are presently, by the sounds of it, being done on punch cards and in paper filing cabinets should be automated and allow the DVA to step into the digital age. And if it's the law preventing it, rather than any kind of technical questions, then we should amend the law. So we look forward to seeing this happening. It makes really good sense, we believe, for computers to determine low-value, high-volume claims like the travel receipts to medical appointments, so the taxi receipts, for example, claims that don't really require high-level human judgment calls. But we want to make sure that the government and the DVA get it right, and that's why we'll be supporting an amendment that I understand Senator Lambie is moving to ensure that at least initially computer programs cannot be used to determine liability for injury. The reason that we will be supporting this amendment, I just want to quote briefly. So Federal Court of Australia Justice Melissa Perry highlighted potential implications of the use of these pre-programmed systems in decision-making, where you need some nuanced and, dare I say, humane judgment calls made. And this is what she says in a speech that she gave not so long ago. She says it is not difficult to envisage that the efficiencies which automated systems can achieve and the increasing demand for such efficiencies may overwhelm an appreciation of the value of achieving substantive justice for the individual, and in turn this may have the consequence that rule-based laws and regulations are too readily substituted for discretions in order to facilitate the making of automated decisions in place of decisions by humans. The same risks exist with respect to decisions which ought to properly turn upon evaluative judgments. And I think the amendment that Senator Lambie will no doubt speak to when she's given the chance to make a contribution, I believe is quite an effective way of making the distinction between a piece of software saying, yes, you took that taxi on that day to that appointment, that should be reimbursed and it shouldn't take 6 months to see the money, and the more nuanced decisions where you actually want human judgments to be brought to bear. Schedule 2 of the bill is where we also have some real difficulty, and that's the schedule that enables the Secretary of the DVA to disclose information about a veteran's case or class of cases, and I'll quote, "to such persons and for such purposes as the Secretary determines, if he or she certifies that it is necessary in the public interest to do so." And that, by definition, is very, very broad in scope. To pick this apart at face value, it gives significant power to the Secretary to disclose private information. Public interest is an extremely amorphous term. We've tried to find legal definitions of what's considered the public interest, and often the public interest is interpreted to mean whatever the minister says on any given day. To add to our concerns, while the Secretary must notify the person in writing about any intention to disclose that information, the Secretary can still go ahead and disclose it even if the veteran has objected. So you tip this person off in writing that you're going to go them in some public way, and if the veteran believes that that is unjust and writes back and says, "Please, can you not?" the minister can go, or the Secretary, I should say, can go ahead and do so anyway. The DVA intends to disclose private information to correct the public record. That sounds familiar to me, and I would have thought that the government would be a little bit more judicious after the disaster that's unfolded with Centrelink in choosing, by way of defending itself, to use the disclosure of veterans' private information to add to their talking points. If you believe that the system or the government's decisions have been made correctly and that the government's position is defensible, you should be able to make that case without disclosing people's personal information. We're not saying the government shouldn't have its say. You've got access to the press gallery upstairs, but you shouldn't be taking the low road, as Minister Tudge has done, and sacrificing people's privacy in order to make that public case. We don't think that's appropriate at all. So what the DVA said in its submission to the Senate inquiry into the bill is the department is aware of instances where misinformation or claims that are not factual have damaged the integrity of programs or prevented veterans from taking up assistance from the department, often leading to wider spread distress among veterans. I do have some sympathy with that point of view and understand why the government's proceeding this way. Make your case without breaching people's privacy. Surely it is no more complicated than that. During the Senate inquiry, the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner stated, "I think any agency needs to be extraordinarily cautious when it is going to release information, particularly when it is sensitive information. When you get to areas such as correcting factual information, it can get into an area where there's potential for an individual's extremely sensitive personal information to be made more widely known." Now, these are not abstract cases. These are men and women that this country has sent into harm's way, potentially damage them sometimes horrifically in the line of serving their country, and then bring them home and potentially have them subjected to the government using their personal trauma or background in order to win a public policy argument. It's completely out of line. What the Office of the Information Commissioner said was, when you look at it overall, the initial disclosure process does seem too broad. And we will no doubt be hearing about the government's development of stringent rules. The minister addressed that issue briefly in his opening comments, and yet the Senate is being asked to pass this bill without any adequate consultation on those rules. So I'm not sure that anybody outside this building has even seen them. If they are to be stringent, if they do have that kind of integrity, put them on the table, put an exposure draft out so that we can analyse them. And the minister, and no doubt his colleagues, will jump up and say, but they'll be disallowable. The point is, if you have confidence in them, the rules are the engine of this piece of law. This will describe how it's circumscribed, how it's going to operate. We think it's really inappropriate, or just speaking on behalf of the Australian Greens anyway, that we're being asked to effectively pass this bill with those rules sight unseen. So for these reasons, we will be supporting amendments to dramatically limit the disclosure provisions of the bill. We'll speak more of that when we get to the committee stage, because there are a couple of different propositions afoot for how we can protect the privacy of veterans while still upholding the obligations of the government and its intentions to streamline the way that these claims are processed, which I don't think you will find any disagreement with anyone in here. We're supportive of the steps that the government's trying to take to make life easier for veterans in their interactions with the DVA and to help those men and women within the bureaucracy who are trying to do a job and who are constrained at the moment by an extremely archaic bill. But we do not support untested computerised decision-making power, where human judgment should stay as a central part of the process. And we don't support excessive powers to publicly disclose information in order to win a political fight, which we've seen happen in the most degrading way here in the last couple of months. And without those adequate constraints on public disclosure in particular, we will not be in a position to support this bill. We look forward to the debate unfolding. I look forward to the contributions of my crossbench colleagues, and we hope that the government will see the light of reason, that the amendments that are being circulated are being done so in good faith by people who have got long-standing history and direct personal experience of these issues, and we hope that you will give the Senate the opportunity to do its job and improve this piece of law.